I made my family disappear.
More than 30 years have passed since the day when Kevin McCallister was left alone at home for the first time. That touching and funny film immediately fell into the category of cult. And since then, millions of people around the world have traditionally watched it on Christmas. What is the reason for such a stunning success, and why couldn't the next films in the franchise repeat it? Today, in About Movies, we will talk about how Home Alone appeared and how the producers each time trampled our favorite franchise into the mud more and more. Are you ready? Then let's start.
This is it. Don't get scared now.
Of course, for any great job, you need at least a little luck. So to speak, everything came together in the work on that film. And it began long before the birth of the picture itself. The fact is that John Hughes, the screenwriter and producer of Home Alone, had previously directed the film Uncle Buck, while working on which he met Macaulay Culkin. The boy could easily make anyone laugh even without words, just by looking at you. Hughes was so fascinated by the talent of the young actor that he decided to write another comedy specifically for him.
Hello.
A more complicated story came out with Chris Columbus. At first, John Hughes offered him to work as a director in an already well-known project about the Griswold family, namely in the film National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Chris, of course, did not refuse such work, especially since the film had very positive predictions. However, his personal acquaintance and communication with Chevy Chase, who was supposed to play the main role, turned out to be not so positive. Then Columbus honestly admitted that it was unlikely that there would be mutual understanding between them, and therefore decided to step back and not participate in the work on that film. Nevertheless, Chris was not against collaborating with John Hughes, who at that time had already released more than one popular comedy. Therefore, he asked if there was another picture for him, and Hughes did not refuse, although at that time, he offered a not very promising project. John was very interested in Columbus taking the director's chair in his new film. At that time, Chris was already known as the screenwriter of at least two well-known projects, Gremlins and The Goonies. But in addition, Hughes drew attention to Columbus as a director in the comedy adventures and babysitting. The director really liked his work, although the film itself was not very popular. And so, we came to a place where there could be a wrong turn. The fact was that Chris Columbus was not familiar with Macaulay Culkin. Respectively, he was very skeptical about the idea of creating a script for a certain actor.
No, Kevin, you're what the French call les incompétents.
That's why he insisted on an audition in which 200 young talents took part. Nevertheless, the auditions only confirmed John Hughes' intuition, and Culkin was approved for the main role. Despite the already confirmed intuition, the screenwriter himself doubted success until the last moment. He was so afraid to let the whole team down that he made edits to the already finished plot right up to the first day of work on the film. John tirelessly searched for ambiguous and controversial moments in the script. In particular, he was haunted by the beginning of the film. Will the audience believe that a mom forgot her child? Won't this be a reason for devastating criticism? The easiest thing happened with the role of the thief Harry Lime. It was suggested to Joe Pesci. There, the stars came together as well as possible, because the actor himself had long dreamed of playing in a comedy. Of course, he agreed, even before he got acquainted with the script. An interesting story turned out with the role of Harry Lime's partner. First, Daniel Stern was invited to play a partner. At that time, the actor was already quite famous and appreciated his work in a considerable amount. Unfortunately, it went far beyond the budget of the film. Consequently, they had to look for a replacement. Soon, the role of the thief Marv was offered to Daniel Roebuck. He treated such an offer as luck. Accordingly, he was ready to work even for a very small fee. However, Luck turned away from Roebuck already on the set. According to Hughes, he did not manage to work with Joe Pesci at all. As a result, it was decided to return Daniel Stern to that role. Of course, Roebuck was very upset by such a refusal immediately after the only short run of the scenario. Commenting on his failure, he suggested that the writers initially did not want to see him in the picture, but used him to convince the producers. But chemistry appeared immediately between Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern. The actors did not have much hope for the film, and therefore did not deny themselves the pleasure of fooling around on the set. But the film hasn't only their grimaces generously. There were real incidents. For example, in the scene where Harry bites Kevin's finger, Joe Pesci actually did it. Culkin even had a scar. In general, the work on the film lasted about 4 months. The test screenings dispelled all the fears of the writers and producers. The audience received the picture very warmly. However, that did not save it from the fact that in the final version, we did not see all the scenes. For example, the audience did not really like that some useless characters appeared in the plot over and over again. Those were scenes from the life of the Culkin family on vacation in Paris. But people were more interested in watching the main character himself. As a result, there are much fewer family shots in the film. Another moment in the work on the film when all the stars came together was the participation of the composer, John Williams. By that time, he had already earned fame on such films as Dracula, Jaws, Indiana Jones, and Star Wars. Meanwhile, the producers of Home Alone, due to a modest budget, did not hope to get someone very famous for that position. However, he asked to hire him himself. As it turned out, John Williams had a habit of going to see working versions of films. By coincidence, Williams somehow got to one of those screenings of the movie Home Alone. He was so impressed by what he saw that he immediately offered himself as a composer. At the same time, for a very moderate fee. The film's release began in November 1990, but since everyone was preparing for the release of Rocky V with Sylvester Stallone in the title role, the Fox Film studio allocated only 1,200 screens to the comedy film, preparing it for second place in the list of the most popular. Although it had to compete for that position with the equally long-awaited cartoon, The Rescuers Down Under. As a result, everything turned out even better for Home Alone. The first box office receipts of The Rescuers Down Under amounted to $3.5 million. Rocky V collected $14 million, and our family comedy for the first week got as much as $17 million. Of course, that provided it with the first place in the chart. However, even that amount did not melt the icy heart of Fox Studio, and it did not allocate additional platforms for screenings to the film Home Alone. The fact was that it was a very fruitful period, and almost immediately after the start of the screening of the above-mentioned pictures, Predator 2 was supposed to be released on the screens. It was for that picture that 2,000 sites were reserved for the film studio. Anyway, that did not prevent the comedy from collecting $20 million in the second week, throwing such a promising Predator to the 4th position in the rating. That became a turning point in their rivalry. Predator 2 received fewer and fewer sites for watching, while Home Alone tirelessly won more and more hearts of the audience. As a result, the failed, as many thought, comedy at the box office only in America collected $285 million, and in the worldwide box office, that amount turned out to be almost twice as much. They got $477 million, which provided the film with another prize, a place in the Guinness Book of World Records. So, Home Alone became a comedy that received the biggest box office of all time. As you could already understand, the film initially had both supporters who offered their services themselves, and opponents who did not believe in its success until the last. Among the latter was actor John Hurd. He, according to Chris Columbus, considered the film absolutely unsuccessful, and therefore was very disappointed with his participation in it. John's disbelief in the success of the film was more aggressive than the grimacing of Daniel Stern and Joe Pesci. He, for example, could be late for the shoot or even intentionally ruin the scene. John Hurd has expressed his dissatisfaction many times to Chris Columbus. However, after the stunning success, Hurd still apologized to the director. In turn, Chris did not lose his head and filmed that moment on video, which he still keeps. Therefore, the matter of forgiveness remains open. Of course, such an amazing result did not go unnoticed by the producers. Now, almost everyone wants to be involved in that kind of picture. The audience did not sit idly by either. They tirelessly sent letters to the studio with requests to film the continuation of the beloved comedy. Under such pressure, John Hughes and Chris Columbus could not resist and took up shooting the second part of the film. It wasn't easy for them. The new picture was to be called Home Alone Again, but in the process of writing the script, they found such a name absurd and therefore abandoned that idea. By the way, in order not to waste time, John Hughes, while working, wrote a script for the third film, where Kevin was already supposed to appear as a teenager. That time, the producers were so confident in the success of the continuation of the film that they approved the script for the third part before shooting the second one. However, Catherine O'Hara, who played the mother of the main character, did not fully agree with the plot of the second picture. In her opinion, the heroine, according to the script, is not very worried about the loss of her son. That's why Catherine asked to strengthen her role by adding several scenes. But the problem came from a very unexpected source. To make the film look real and believable, the scenes at the airport were shot without interrupting its usual work. And if during the shooting of the first part there was no difficulty in that, then that time the popularity of the franchise played a cruel joke with its creators. Fans of the movie repeatedly left the guards and tried to touch the real star Macaulay Culkin, at least for a moment. The boy, of course, was forced to run away, and the shooting had to be stopped. The hotel where the filming took place also had an equally interesting story. By the way, if you didn't know, it belongs to Donald Trump.
Excuse me, where's the lobby?
Down the hall and to the left.
Thanks.
The carpet was removed from the hall for the scene where the main character slides on the floor. However, upon completion of filming, Trump forbade its return. It was speculated that he was having fun in this way, deliberately waiting for the next slipped guest. Nevertheless, the owner himself denies such accusations, explaining the further absence of the carpet only by the fact that he wanted to preserve the atmosphere of the film in his hotel. It is worth noting that for the same reason, he even forbade removing the flooring there. There were some circumstances during the work on the second part that fairly tickled Chris Columbus's nerves. The director was excited by the fact that one of the episodes required more money than was allocated. And the thing was that when it was time to shoot a Christmas comedy in New York Central Park, the universe decided to play a cruel joke with the filming crew. There was no snow at all. Consequently, it was decided to use an artificial one. It was a very expensive pleasure. But the saddest thing was that it didn't even take a couple of shooting days before it started snowing in the city. As a result, the second part of Home Alone cost $28 million, while $18 million was spent on the first film. As for advertising and screening sites, all doors were open for the second film. Of course, it is not surprising that it got a wonderful box office and took the first place, grossing $31 million. After the first week of screening, two more box office gigants, Aladdin and The Bodyguard, joined Home Alone 2, but they never managed to get around the comedy that the audience loved very much. The rating changed only according to the results of the year. As the results of the box office receipts from the screenings of these three films showed, people preferred Aladdin, which got $504 million. The second place in the chart was taken by The Bodyguard, receiving 410 honestly earned millions, and pushing Home Alone 2 to third place with a result of $358 million. As experts suggest, the whole point was that, for the most part, the public considered the second picture a banal copy of the first part. Unfortunately, the rating was dropped by fans, because the first part collected $285 million in the USA, while the second, $100 million less. It grossed $173 million in total, and the critics did not really watch their mouths commenting on the second part. But despite such rates, the popularity of the film pushed the producers to immediately continue the story.
Pardonnez-moi, mon chéri.
However, the writer and producer John Hughes opposed such a rush. He wanted to wait until Macaulay Culkin grew up, so that the hero, who according to the script was already a teenager, did not look almost the same as in the first two parts. To everyone's surprise, Culkin's growing up did not solve the problem, but only aggravated it. While the filmmakers were waiting for the actor to grow up, he continued to act in other films. But then one failure after another was waiting for him. Just a barrage of criticism fell on the film Good Son, although it is worth noting the box office was not a failure. However, the following films with his participation could not be justified even by this. The failure of the film Rich Richie finished off the young actor. After considering his situation, the actor decided to put his career on pause. The producers of the third part of Home Alone were also shocked by that decision of the actor. By the way, they did not give up trying to convince the actor to return to the cinema to play the beloved Kevin McCallister. But he was firm in his decision. Well, in that case, there were only two options left. Either rewrite the plot or close the project. Most of those involved the creation of Home Alone 3 considered the second option more reasonable, although the film studio protested. They were not ready to abandon the film, and therefore sought to have the plot rewritten to offer the role to a younger actor. After much friction, a way out of the situation seemed to have been found. So, the preliminary work on the creation of a spin-off began. Now the story had to unfold around Kevin's brother. Interestingly, Macaulay and Kieran, who play stage brothers, are actually brothers. Only in reality they are relatives, and in the film, they are cousins. In addition, thanks to that plot twist, some other beloved characters could remain in the film. It's not hard to guess that John Hughes was betting on pranksters Daniel Stern and Joe Pesci, but that time the actors were not in the mood for entertainment and therefore categorically refused to take part. They had to forget about the spin-off. As the next option, they began to consider the series. According to the idea, there should have been 24 episodes showing the story of a boy who confronts bad adults. The work on the series had begun, but not for long. After reviewing the part of the script that was ready at that time, the studio found it more expedient to abandon that format and remake it into a full-length film. As a result, about 200 young talents took part in the casting of actors for the main role. Among them was Macaulay Culkin's partner in the film The Good Son, Elijah Wood. Who knows? Perhaps the universe saved his talent for a more profitable project, because a few years later, he became the star of The Lord of the Rings. And then Elijah seemed to the producers very mature for the role of the main character in Home Alone 3, and he was refused. Nevertheless, in this film, we can see another very famous movie star today, Scarlett Johansson. Of course, everyone saw Chris Columbus as the director of the third part, but he wasn't thrilled with the idea. Even John Hughes himself could not change Columbus's mind. The director explained his refusal by saying that it would be difficult for him to get used to new actors. But he did not leave John with nothing, but recommended that Raja Gosnell be considered instead. Hughes didn't mind because he already knew Raja from his editing of the first part of Home Alone. Gosnell, in turn, did not refuse to participate once again in an already familiar project, especially that time as a director. Apparently, Raja was not mistaken in his decision, because after that work, one after another, he directed such popular films as Never Been Kissed, Big Mama's House, and Scooby-Doo. As a result, the third part of Home Alone became the most expensive, because the budget of the film was $32 million. The film screening was in December 1997, but that time, Home Alone was only in fourth position, collecting only $5 million. Unfortunately, the audience did not like the movie at all, and after 2 weeks, he did not enter the top 10 lines of the chart at all. To date, the general opinion about the film is less categorical. Many consider it even quite good. For example, the famous film critic and Pulitzer Prize winner Roger Ebert generally considered the third part the most successful. The failed situation with cinema release was slightly corrected by the release of the film on videotape. The worldwide box office allowed them to return the invested $32 million and earn $47 million more on top. In general, the box office was $79 million. Many are still arguing about if Culkin had still starred in the sequel, would it have been as successful? Of course, there is no denying that the charm of the main character is an important component of the film. But even if Culkin had stayed, he could not save a film with a bad script and unsuccessful direction on his fragile teenage shoulders. In the first films, all the stars came together. Music, plot, atmosphere, actors were right.
Hiya, pal.
The third part, although it was tolerable, could not preserve the magic that its predecessors had. Even though screenwriter John Hughes was still at the helm, the story had plot holes. In some places, there was clearly too much violence, which was why the very idea of a good family movie was lost. Have you watched remakes and sequels of Home Alone? If so, how do you feel about them? Write about it in the comments. Of course, after the failure with the full meter, it was decided to make a continuation of the series. The pilot series for the TV show was supposed to be Home Alone 4. Some actors even immediately signed relevant contracts for subsequent filming. However, the picture was very coldly received by the public and showed a very low rating. Interestingly, Daniel Stern was again tried to persuade to star in his role, but after reading the script, the actor was very indignant at such a proposal and considered it, as he himself stated, the biggest insult in his entire professional career. No wonder Stern literally spat from the script. If the third movie could still be watched without a facepalm, then the fourth one causes nothing but disgust amongst the fans of the franchise.
Kevin's not with me. He's back at Natalie's house.
Really? I was just told he's with you.
Well, don't worry, Kate. I'm sure everything's fine.
Okay.
Everything is bad there, starting with a clearly overplaying hero who enjoys violence and ending with the absence of any hint of a Christmas atmosphere. As a result, they refuse to shoot the series. However, the hope of making money on our nostalgia from the producers has not disappeared anywhere. Therefore, the fourth part was followed 10 years later, namely in 2012, by the fifth. That time, the audience was certainly not modest, and therefore the film was generally rated at 3 points out of 10. We don't know if any of you will risk watching it now. But oddly enough, the continuation followed even after that part. It is enviable constancy, isn't it? When Chris Columbus found out that Disney was going to do a restart of the franchise, he spoke out quite sharply. In this version of Hollywood that we live in, everybody is remaking everything and rebooting everything. I mean, there's a Home Alone reboot coming out. What's the point? The movie exists, let's just live with the movie that existed. There's no point in any of us remaking The Wizard of Oz. There's no point in any of us remaking the classic films. Make something original, because we need more original material. It's a pity, but Disney didn't heed Chris's advice. In 2021, the next Home Alone was presented to the world. However, now without specifying the serial number, the film was released specifically for the Disney Plus platform. What to do? The audience was no less constant in their review. Therefore, the remake, like the fourth and fifth parts, got 3 points out of 10. The consensus on the Rotten Tomatoes website is short, but ruthless. Nobody's home. If you're interested in the critic's opinion, Kevin McCallister of The Times wrote, "Everything that happens before the mayhem, the burglary begins after a full hour of padding, is excruciatingly forced." Well, as they say, stability is a sign of mastery. And although in the case of Home Alone it has become negative from a certain point, it is quite possible that someday, some version will be given to us for discussion. Who knows? Maybe the future picture will still be another hit. After all, do not forget that almost no one believed in the first film either. Home Alone is far from the only franchise that has fallen victim to greedy studios who want to cash in on a story that everyone loves. A simple example is Pirates of the Caribbean. At first, no one believed in it either, but suddenly the story of the pirates became a dizzying success, and Disney decided to make the most of it. The first 3 parts came out great, but the fourth and fifth films were frankly weaker than the first 3 and disappointed many. Why did that happen? Why did Pirates of the Caribbean get worse from movie to movie? We talked about that in our other video essay. Follow the link and watch. And also, don't forget to like this video. About Movies was with you. See you in the following videos.